What's going on, everybody? Brenden Schaeffer back with another fantasy football mock draft. And for the second time this season, we will be drafting from the 1.1 in this video. This will be a full point PPR as opposed to the half point PPR version from the 1.1 that we did, a couple weeks ago at this point in time. You can find it on the channel if you scroll back. Appreciate all the support, by the way, that we've gotten so far on the channel. We're closing in now on 250 subscribers, which is incredible considering we've really only been making videos for a couple of weeks. So if you enjoy the content on this channel, you like fantasy football, you want to learn more about trade strategy as we get into the season, that's going to be a topic that we focus a lot on throughout the season on the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel. Hit that subscribe button. Join me for this ride. It's going to be a fun 2023 NFL season. We'd love to have you along for the ride with me. Hit subscribe, hit like on this video, and drop your comments below with your thoughts, your questions, anything you want to see in future videos. Anything is fair game on the channel, so drop the comment below, and we'll get right into it. But we're going to go with a full point PPR from the 1.1 here because I don't even know if I'd call it an epiphany. I just had a thought where I wondered what could, rather than going the conventional route, which I think at this point in the season, in the draft process for everybody, as drafts are taking place this weekend and next, what about not going the conventional route of Justin Jefferson at the 1.1? Because I feel like that is the chalk at this point. I also think there's maybe a route where Jamar Chase outscores Jefferson this year in fantasy, but it's just kind of hard to project that sort of thing after the season that Jefferson just had. You'd be crazy almost not to take him at 1.1. And when you compare it to what you could get from Christian McCaffrey, there's certainly just as much upside, I think, with CMC. When you look at the numbers actually from last year, particularly in a full point setting, I wonder if Sleeper's going to give this to me here. Yes. Hopefully you can see this on your screen. 2022, 356 PPR points for Christian McCaffrey. Pretty incredible. He had 470 a couple of years ago in his big monster year that CMC had. Jefferson was 368 last year. So only 12 more points for Justin Jefferson compared to CMC. And now CMC is going to get the chance to spend the full season in that San Francisco offense rather than the sort of crummy offense in Carolina that he started last year with. But I wondered, if McCaffrey gets those 80 to 90 receptions and scores more touchdowns, has the goal line work often in the San Francisco offense, has the running back workload of more than 1,000 rushing yards, he could certainly clear 360 PPR points. And I'm not saying that's the ceiling for Jefferson, but he'd almost have to score 10, 12, 14 touchdowns in order to go beyond what he did last year. I think he had 8 touchdowns a year ago. I just wanted to run the thought experiment. What would a Christian McCaffrey at the 1.1, what would that do for the rest of my roster if I were drafting from the 1.1? So that's what we're going to do today. If you want to see what it looks like to draft Justin Jefferson, to go the conventional wisdom where he's ranked on ADP with the 1.1, scroll back on my channel. I believe I titled the video something like, is the 1.1 the best draft position in 2023 fantasy football? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But this time I'm going to go Christian McCaffrey. I'm going to shake it up a little bit because I want to see where that leaves me with the rest of my roster. A lot of conversation in the comments on that previous video about how 1.1 is maybe not a very good draft position because, as you can see right now, it's happening on your screen. A lot of quality players are flying off the board. And we don't get to pick until 212. Now, we do get to double stack it here. We're on the turn, basically, the inverse of the turn. And so we're going to get an opportunity to take 2 really good players, but it's a long wait to get to go again. Now, here's something that happened that Sleeper, I don't know. I don't know how realistic this is. I guess it's plausible because Tony Pollard's ADP is 23.9. But it's not my favorite thing to see happen, to be honest with you, in a draft where I went running back first overall. But Tony Pollard's value at the back of the second is tremendous. If you see Tony Pollard at the 2.12, you got to hit that button. Almost no matter what. It's going to make us a little bit lean when it comes to wide receiver value in this draft. But we're going to take Tony Pollard here because it's just the best player available strategy. Tony Pollard, man, I loved Tony Pollard last year. I didn't have a YouTube channel last year, but if I did, you would have seen me drafting Tony Pollard everywhere in the 6th, 7th round. Wherever he was going, he was my guy going into last year. And it's nice to see him now up to the second round. But he should be in this Derrick Henry range at worst. I think there's a world in which you take Tony Pollard early in the second round. I'd prefer him to Josh Jacobs. So it's interesting to see him all the way here. We're going to scoop him up. Now, where does that leave us in terms of the rest of this draft? Chris Olave is a wide receiver 1 on his team, but you've got Higgins, Devontae Smith, and arguably DK Metcalf that may not be. Calvin Ridley's a guy that I am high on. I usually take him in the back of the third, though. Right now, I don't really know. I gotta hit the button on my guy, Mark Andrews. Again, guys, if he's in the beginning of the third round, I think I did this on the previous video that I did from the 1.1 draft position. That was a half-point draft, and I believe in that draft, by the way, let me get my roster showing so I can give you guys more to look at. In that draft, I believe we had 2 flex spots. This one's going to be a little bit lighter because we've only got 1 flex to be concerned about. Now, the fact that I have gone 3 rounds without a wide receiver, very unusual for people who know me and know the way that I like to play fantasy football. But in this spot, I just felt it was necessary because Mark Andrews, to get him a round and a half later than Travis Kelce goes, I'm not saying that Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews are going to basically finish around the same spot this year. I don't think that's necessarily the case. But if you look back at Mark Andrews' numbers, was it 2021? Yeah, he had 300 PPR points in 2021. Last year was a bit of a disaster, only finished with 190, partially due to some injuries that he was dealing with, but also related to some things with Lamar Jackson, right? His health was not strong. So if you can get both those guys healthy, I think people are sleeping on Mark Andrews. I spent a lot of time talking about the Andrews pick, not enough time thinking about how I'm going to take DJ Moore right here. What I want to do in this spot is stack DJ Moore with Justin Fields. Now, I didn't get a chance to do that because Fields went off the board at 4.10. But that's something that you can do. I mean, I've seen mocks where it's happened. I've seen real drafts where it's happened. Available at the 4-5 turn is that Chicago Bears stack. I'm basically drafting that stack every single time if it's there. It wasn't in this spot, and I kind of talked my way through it without looking too closely at the wide receivers, but I knew I'd have another pick coming up. So let's go ahead and take a look at the board. Judy dealing with a bit of an injury. Drake London, I don't feel comfortable with as my wide receiver 2, given the low passing volume of the Atlanta Falcons offense. Christian Watson's interesting. That's a wide receiver 1 for his team. How much do you believe in Jordan Love? Do you believe in Love after Rodgers? I guess would be the question there. I tentatively do, more so than I believe in Chris Godwin, and I've already got a 49er, so it's not going to be Brandon Ayuk. And just a tad early to go Tyler Lockett. If I'm on the other end of this draft board, drafted on the other turn, Tyler Lockett very much in play for me. Not going to be the case this time, however. But we grab a couple of upside wide receivers in DJ Moore and Christian Watson, which I think is important for where we are. Because if you notice, we don't have that much wide receiver. It's just those 2 guys. But, man, do we like our running backs. McCaffrey and Tony Pollard. So, again, do I think generally I'm going to be drafting Justin Jefferson from the 1-1 if I have that pick? Yeah. And for whatever reason, sleeper went Eckler too. Don't do that. Take Jefferson, or if you want to call your shot on Chase, Jamar Chase does have the better quarterback. I think Chase's PPR total last year was 240. He had some injuries that he dealt with. You're taking the wide receiver most of the time if you're Brenden, because what I like to do is play it safe and get upside in the same pick. McCaffrey, upside is undeniable. It's not safe, though, because running backs get injured, and this particular running back gets injured. But we're doing it because we really like where we're at. And I spent all this time talking about Tyler Lockett. Nobody drafted him. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I don't think you'll very often see Tyler Lockett fall to 6.12. But he does here. For those who are worried about Smith and Jigba and DK Metcalf, I think last year showed you, and really every year of Tyler Lockett's career, I get it. He's 30 years old. See, I called him older than he is. Look at these numbers for PPR. I don't know if this will show up very well on screen, but 2022, he had 237, 241 the year before, 264 the year before, 234, 220. That's 5 consecutive seasons of 220 or more. In 4 in a row, he's been in the 230s or more. That's just consistency. For a wide receiver 3, that's basically what I'm looking for, especially when I've got some volatility in a guy like Christian Watson, DJ Moore. And then to keep it going a little bit, Mike Williams is sitting here. He's got volatility for sure, but in this shallow format, take a look at what that does for us. Mike Williams is actually on our bench. So you can kind of pick and choose matchup based between, I would say, the tier to DJ Moore down to Mike Williams. Those guys are all kind of fantasy wide receiver 2 range, in my opinion, this year. So you can definitely play matchups and bench one of your previously drafted wide receivers if you want. But for the fact that we didn't take wide receivers until the 4th round at all, and now we've slammed 4 in a row, I kind of feel good with where we are, surprisingly so. And then we get to pick twice in a row again, and there are wide receivers on the board that I still like. But let's double back and make sure we're not missing anything at running back. Things that we want to note that happened during the middle of the rounds. Javonte Williams, middle of the 7th. Keep an eye on his cost. He's a guy that I'm in on if you've watched my other videos. By the way, subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the videos. But he goes in the mid-7th here. I think if you want to guarantee to get him, you got to draft him by the mid-6th, late 6th. But he does fall here, so that's nice. James Cook, 7-12. That is a value, but he's on the other side of the board, so we weren't able to do anything about that. Nobody we love at running back right now. We're going to take one more wide receiver because Gabe Davis is another guy that I am in on. Post-hype sleeper. It's always nice to get a guy after the hype sort of dies down on him. You were paying Gabe Davis last year like round 4, round 5. I think there's no reason to think he's in a worse situation coming into this year, and you're getting a solid 3-round discount. Love Gabe Davis at the back of the 8th. Would have loved to have had a crack at Jordan Addison, especially since we didn't take Jefferson in that Minnesota offense, but he goes 8.4. We take Gabe Davis with glee at 8.12. Remember, though, we do only have 2 running backs, so we're probably going to need to take one here. And the guy that I tend to like in this range is still available, and that's Zach Charbonnet. This is a full-point PPR setting. Ken Walker is a stud, but a couple of things about Ken Walker. One, dealt with some nagging injuries last year, and then again already this preseason. I don't know that I buy into the notion of injury prone. It kind of depends on the player, but those things do tend to stick in your mind when you can see them happen, and it's kind of hard to shake that as a fantasy manager. But the other part of it is Zach Charbonnet, even if Ken Walker is healthy this year, Pete Carroll wants to run the football, and Charbonnet is seemingly going to carve out a 3rd down role where he can be kind of a pass catcher out of that backfield. And that's great in full PPR. So because we have 2 great running back options at the top with McCaffrey and Pollard, we needed another one, and I think Charbonnet fits the billing exactly what we're looking for. We're going to make sure we leave this draft with at least 1 more, maybe 2 more. Keep in mind, too, I don't have kickers or defense on this draft right now, so if you end up in a situation where your leagues have those, don't draft them. Don't draft them and then pick them up on Saturday night. September 9th, I believe, is that Saturday night. 2 weeks from tonight. So at 1:12 a.m., I'm recording this at 1 a.m. Pick them up then. No need to do it any time before that. Boy. I'm gonna run out of time. Don't let that happen. Yeah, I know, Sleeper. I know, this is for demonstration purposes. Well, looks like we got Daniel Jones. Yeah, don't let that happen. Don't run out of time. Taking a look here, though, Daniel Jones is actually a good value. He gives you rushing upside as well. I was thinking, do I want to go Jared Goff? But what I realized is I'm not going to end up with Sam Laporta from this draft because I do have Mark Andrews at tight end. So that's what was kind of grip locking me a little bit on that. The other pick I'm going to make here, probably, we're looking at Sky Moore. We like Sky Moore, but we already have 5 wide receivers. I do have a late-round running back target, though, too. Sky Moore is a great pick. Tank Bigsby at running back. I just want to make sure I'm giving you guys the names that I think you should be paying attention to in these rounds. Jaylen Warren, look, I know that Najee's going to be the starter for the Steelers, but don't forget about Jaylen Warren. I think he honestly looks better. Kendre Miller is another great one. We're going to go Tank Bigsby here. I know he had a fumble in their most recent preseason game for the Jaguars, but Tank Bigsby is a good running back out of Auburn. When healthy last year, he was a force to be reckoned with. Sky Moore would be a great pick, and he ends up going at the 11.8. But we feel like we're pretty solid at wide receiver, honestly. And Tank Bigsby, I think, league-winning upside if something should happen to ETN. With DJ Moore, Christian Watson, Tyler Lockett, Mike Williams, Gabe Davis, we feel very solid about where we're at. and we wanted to get one more running back. Bigsby and Charbonnet off the bench, McCaffrey and Pollard in our lineup. I think that was the right call. And in fact, you could even get one more running back here. I think I will. I think I will go ahead and grab one more running back. You look at the wide receiver room, there's really nobody. I will mention the name Justin Ross. One thing that I want to have people thinking about with Justin Ross, he may not even make the Chiefs. I think he will. He definitely should. They've invested enough time in him at this point with him being on IR all last year. You might as well see what he's got. I'm going to take Deuce Vaughn here before the clock runs out, and then I want to explain something about Justin Moore. Deuce Vaughn, the Mr. Irrelevant. Those are the two guys I want to talk about real quick before we get out of here on this video. Did I say Justin Moore? I think he's like a country singer. Justin Ross is who I was referring to. Here's what I like about picking up Justin Ross, or even like if you're in a more shallow league where Sam Laporta maybe doesn't get drafted, he's a good guy to pick up. The Chiefs and the Lions play on September 7th, Thursday night. That's the opener of the NFL season. If you're in a league that has a defense, a DST spot, and or a kicker spot, what you should be doing instead of drafting those positions, especially if you play on Sleeper, Yahoo lets you do this as well. ESPN does not. But if you play on Yahoo or Sleeper, you should be doing this. Especially if your draft is like this weekend, Labor Day weekend. You've got several days before the season begins. You should be picking players that you can drop if they don't pan out, right? You can drop them and go ahead and pick up your defense or your kicker, and you can find out about a guy like Justin Ross as of that Thursday night football game. So let's say you have Justin Ross, and he doesn't do anything for the Chiefs on Thursday night. You can just drop him. Again, make sure your league allows this, because some leagues will say once a guy has their game for that week, he's locked onto your roster. ESPN, by default, does that. Yahoo and Sleeper do not, by default, do that. So I'm going to pick up Justin Ross in some leagues. I'm just going to see what he does on that Thursday. If he does something really interesting, you go, oh, I want to keep him. I'm going to scramble on Friday and Saturday that weekend to try and make a trade that gets me down to the roster limit so I don't have to drop Justin Ross, which is a little bit of pressure, but it can be a very fun and honestly beneficial way to approach your bench situation. Always use the bench spots to your most availability. And Justin Ross is a prime example. Sam Laporta is a Lion, supposed to be their first team tight end. We'll see what he ends up doing. But if he does nothing on Thursday night and you go, whatever, he was my last round pick, maybe he's somebody you drop. I personally would be stashing Laporta and not dropping him. But that's an example of something that you can kind of mess around a little bit with. Definitely getting into the weeds. I know a lot of people go, it makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to go into Saturday or Sunday morning without a defense or a kicker. I cannot tell you the number of times I've picked up my kicker at 11:58 living in the Central Time Zone. So if you're on the East Coast, 12:58 on Sunday afternoon right before those games start, because it can just be an advantage for you. So that's what I would do. Justin Ross is a guy to keep in mind when you're approaching it that way. Deuce Vaughn, I've said in other videos, he's like 5'5", but he is a firecracker. Reminds me of Darren Sproles. Covered him in Central Texas, covering high school football down there for the Austin newspaper. And he was electric then, electric at Kansas State. And I think, like, when you think about the way that the Cowboys are talking about that running back room, or at least the reports that are coming out, Tony Pollard's going to be the number one guy. And I happen to have him on this roster, so Deuce Vaughn is almost like a nice little handcuff. Last year, Malik Davis was seemingly going to be the guy that would be thrust into the backup role of Zeke Elliott left, which Zeke was dropped. But Malik Davis hasn't really taken that role, it seems, and Rico Dowdle is the other guy they have. He's like a 25-year-old backup. I just don't know if any of those other guys are going to be as relevant as the skill set Deuce Vaughn has. I don't know if Deuce Vaughn can, bang inside and run the ball up between the tackles, but I think Deuce Vaughn in the offense that's evidently Dak Prescott, was calling plays for the preseason game tonight. Like, I think they're going to do some creative and interesting things with Deuce Vaughn. So he's a guy that I do not mind throwing onto the end of my bench just to kind of see how it looks in the early portion, because he very well may be like the backup. He could be the Tony Pollard this year, whereas last year it was Pollard as the backup to Zeke Elliott, and then we saw Pollard be the much more explosive player. I think Pollard will still be explosive, but keep an eye on Deuce Vaughn. He's a guy that I'm very intrigued by. Let me know what you think of this video. Let me know what you'd like to see, guys, in future videos. Going to wrap things up here. Ask you one more time, hit that subscribe button. Want to get us to 250, maybe to 300 before the beginning of the NFL season. Who knows how high we could get this thing to climb. But thank you guys for supporting me, and let me know what you want to see. This channel is for y'all. I'm looking forward to doing it all season long. So thank you guys once again, and we'll talk to you next time on the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football Channel. Peace.